and welcome to an Actors Active Series Rewind. I'm your host, creator, and executive producer, Michele Baldwin, and I'm so elated that we are wrapping up our Voting Summit series with the ladies today. That's right. We've heard from the men, we've heard from the youth. Today, the queens will have their say, sharing our thoughts, our concerns, our issues, and why it is so important for all of us to go out and vote. With 2 days left till election day to vote in person, it's time to talk.
Hi, my name is Benja K. Thomas. I am producer and host for Actors Life, the series Rewind. Today we have the women on, and we're going to tell you why we think it's important that you get out in 2 more days and place your vote for whoever candidate you choose to vote for.
Hi, my name is Renee Mathis, and I'm your guest correspondent. Now, let's go over a few housekeeping rules, okay? For our guests, please be mindful of movement in the window and keep your mics off until it's time for you to speak. Relax and have fun. If you need to leave, please turn your camera and sound off.
I'm Annie Bien. I'm a writer of flash fiction and poetry, and I'm also a translator of Tibetan Buddhist texts into English.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mariana Carreno. I'm a playwright and a stage director, and I teach playwriting at Burgess College, and I'm very happy to be here to talk about this election.
Hi, I'm Katrina Poe. I'm a playwright, an actor, producer, and I too am excited for this election.
Zoom attendees, please keep your cameras and sound on mute until we call upon you during the Q&A. Also, please don't forget to use the raise hand request or send a message in the chat box to all if you wish to comment. Again, please make sure your phones are muted and videos are off during taping of the show. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
So ladies, I thought as women, I just felt like it was befitting to start our conversation off with women's rights. And no matter what you feel about abortion, Roe versus Wade, I'm just perturbed that a body of old men feel the need to tell us what to do with our bodies. So I'm not here to say that I believe in abortion or not abortion or when life begins or doesn't end, because there's a whole nother conversation around how humans are being treated that are born and that are in the world. And we can talk about that as well. But I just feel that as women, we should be the deciding factor in what happens to our bodies. I do not believe that the rights or the things that are in conversation right now as regards to our bodies should not even be up for debate, should not be in any politics or in any superior court. Are there any laws that say that men should or shouldn't do things with their bodies? Absolutely not. So why are there laws that govern and dictate what we want to do or should do or have our own personal opinion about what happens with our bodies? It's bad enough that the medical, like there's no cure for cancer, for breast cancer, but there's a cure for prostate cancer. Anything that deals with a man, there's a cure. Men can get their Viagra for free. We have to pay for birth control. So
it's hard not to agree with anything that you said. Like, I'm like, well, yeah, but it's being normalized. This is a thing, and it's not what I think. It's like, this is fact-based. The majority of Americans, I actually believe in a more in taking politics out of women's bodies. And yet there is a whole movement that ignores the majority of Americans in order to regulate women's bodies. And that's where I mean, what we're seeing with the Supreme Court right now is about. So it's ridiculously unjust how all these things have been developed.
However, they can use the fetuses of aborted babies in medicine to cure 45. And so, what do you say about that? I haven't heard anything said about that.
No, they don't talk about that.
No, they came out and said that because it wasn't an abortion that he was a part of, it was okay that they used the cells on him. Of course, if we all remember back years ago when they first started stem cell research, all of those groups were like, absolutely not. So,
yeah.
I think that there's been so much rationalization to objectify women for a very, very long time. And even as we're growing up, we've been trained as women to think of ourselves as subservient because of the way the societal structure is created. And then things started to change because of women's rights being acknowledged, and and when 45 was elected, how many women came out and spoke up. So that was in its own way very, very empowering. And then yet at the same time to realize that it's these old men who are still in charge of deciding whether we have a right to talk about our own bodies instead of them who've made all of these decisions about what women are supposed to do and not to do. That's very distressing to see it revert so much, and to have so many women also just kind of go along with it, which is very disturbing as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I say shame on the women that are in the Supreme Court, the women that are in the houses, that the women that stand behind 45, like there is, from what I understand, what there was like an old show called the Stepford Wives, where they were just the robots. And so that's what we're looking at. Like, how dare you think that it's okay for a man to tell us what to do and what not to do with our bodies? And as we all ladies have just said here, that it's even a conversation, that it's even in your politics and it is in your business, but then you want to steal our stem, our babies, and take the stem cells for the research, as Benja said. So it's ridiculous. So shame on anyone that doesn't have the mind to say that this is abnormal, to even be, that we're even in this position as women.
Especially because 45 is so disrespectful to women. I'm just thinking about when he first ran for election, and he said something about one reporter and her bloody, what was that?
her blood was Megyn Kelly after a debate when she held him account. So
yeah, he's just disgusting. And even the fact that he's sitting in the White House and those folks think that it's okay for him to sit in the White House, the way he treats women, the way he treats human beings, and to have, I don't know, he's got 100 and there, I don't know how many like, I just don't even know. Like, I think he's just fighting to stay out of jail as opposed to fighting to come back to help us, because there is no plan for the next 4 years. The plan is, damn it, I escaped jail one more time.
definitely. And also, it's a hard question I get for people who are very religious and who, whatever their feelings are on a woman's right to choose. But to me, it's so difficult, like with the stem cell research. It's like the hypocrisy of not caring about life after. I have very, my sister and brother-in-law are very, they're conservative, and they used to not to be, but then they went back to being very conservative and Catholic once they started having kids. And she's Italian. And I remember, and I said, ask how many people at your church believe in the death penalty. And she was shocked to find out how many people were all for killing people. And I said, that's why, I have an issue. So
yeah, blowing up the clinics where the doctors and the poor innocent nurses work to help in Planned Parenthood. Again, this, like what you said, there's no concern, as Benja has said many times, as we talked about, there's no concern for our babies in the cages. There's no concern for the children that we bring into the world, that the mother is a single mother and can't afford to pay for childcare. So, but then you don't want to give her a food stamp, and you don't want to give her, you want to take away all, like Planned Parenthood was more than just an abortion clinic. It was a place where people were able to get resources to be able to take care of the family that they decided to keep. And so you want to take away these things from us, but then you want us to have a billion babies that no one can take care of, and that you have no interest in taking care of. And when the child is poor and grows up and needs to eat and robs you, then you want to throw them in jail. So I mean, again, we could just go on and on and on, but I'm gonna stop here and let you ladies pick another subject if you want, because it's clear we all know what we would know and feel what we feel.
I mean, that's a good segue into like the kids in cages right now at the border, and what we're doing. I mean, there are 545 kids whose parents are nowhere to be, like, and the rhetoric of it is like, well, the parents didn't want them back. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Like, it's so bizarre, like that, how language is manipulated in ways that are ridiculous, and that goes from women's right to immigration to everything. It's like living in a dystopian fantasy where black is white is black, and everything is upside down. But we still have 545 kids whose parents are nowhere to be found.
And not only that, but he had the balls to say that they are well taken care of. Anybody who has lost a child for a minute knows the horror and the shock of trying to find that kid, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. You know, you remember the time when your kid was on the beach and you couldn't find your kid, and where were they? You know, so I feel so horrible for those parents, and it goes back to slavery, when we were ripped away from our parents to be sold off into slavery. But these children, I don't even know where they are. I remember seeing a news report that some of them were here in Harlem. They had a car full of these young girls, and I don't know where they were taking these young girls, but they had a car full of these young girls, and a reporter was running after them, and they were like, where are you going with these girls? And there was just no answer. I mean, they spread these children all over the country. They had this maniacal plan to take these children to begin with, and I am just so enraged by it. I'm gonna let somebody else speak.
This kind of ties into what I also wanted to talk about regarding immigration, is that I came to the United States when I was 18 months old, and from Hong Kong, and my father's dream was to become a citizen of the United States, where he read the Constitution and said, he said he wanted to bring us to the place where the people of the United States were as one, and that we would have the right to vote, we would have a voice. And when we came here, I was so small, I can't imagine what would have happened if someone came and separated my brother and sister and me from our parents. It was already a traumatic enough trip for my parents to have to leave a place. I think a lot of times what people don't understand about immigration is that many people don't want to leave their homes when they come to the United States, but it's because they can't stay there where they lived before, because the conditions are such that they can't live or survive in a way where they can be happy. They're going to be persecuted. So to come to a place where you think you have a chance and to be treated like that is just must be very devastating, because my family, I was lucky. My father came on a Refugee Act for educated Chinese people. And so he had a job set up and he had something to come to. And we were treated very well. We actually, I finally got old enough to go to get my citizenship with my parents, we got a letter from our congressman welcoming us to the United States and saying if we had any problems to please contact him, because we had the letter to prove that we were citizens. And to think that there are all these people who can't live where they wanted to live, where in their birthlands, to not be welcome or to be given a chance, although that all they've ever heard about was how great the United States is for all people, because it's the melting pot and because anyone can come here and try and have their dreams. It is, that's really, really disturbed me. Also along the lines of that, of thinking of how many immigrants are the developers of scientific research, of things that you never would have thought could have happened. We have a whole group of the people in the United States who don't believe in scientists. Well, if you don't believe in scientists, you shouldn't be using your cell phone. You shouldn't be having electricity. You should turn everything off. You should keep your water dirty. You shouldn't have it purified. It's that kind of thing that is so lacking of intelligence and standing on this high horse, some of them thinking that they are spiritually rich in their religion, but the actual definition of religion is to hold yourself back from the disaster of harming other people. And they don't know this. They just live by theory. And so they have no compassion. And those are many things all tied into one, but I think that's it. It's really driven me to feel very strongly about this election, not necessarily always in a positive way, because of how despairing it has been to have your mind assaulted every day by things that before, maybe 6 years ago, we didn't really think about the news very much. And now every day we have to read the news because we don't know what kind of disaster is pending next.
I was just, yeah, I mean, the kids in cages thing has obviously, I mean, I actually, last summer, I and Mariana worked on it with me, did a whole project about this. We did a 3-day kind of weird thing down at the Cherry Lane with Labyrinth, and depicted a child being ripped away from their parents, and along with a lot of other amazing pieces that went with it. But the thing to me that's so awful is that you think, and maybe it's, you know, I'm a white woman, middle class in America, so I think more highly of, or thought more highly of the country, I think, than, even though I thought I saw it clearly. But the inability to do anything, you know, I mean, when I did this project, I did a bunch of research, we raised a bunch of money for a couple programs who were working, hands, great programs working down at the border. But like the fact that, what can we do? Like, I would have never thought that we as a country would allow that to happen. And I mean, we got a little up in arms and apparently things were better. But then, like, you know, a friend of mine was like, I just want to go like Batman and break into this facility and break out these kids and everybody. And I too, I'm a parent. So I mean, I of course am terrified for the kids, but I think about those parents all the time and what they're thinking. Where is my kid? You know, and I can't, the courage to come to this country to be an immigrant is, I had a friend as a young child in elementary school who had come over. She was from Hong Kong, I mean, not Hong Kong, from Vietnam. And so, and we were very close, and to watch her like have to like assimilate and come in, and was like, I just, it's so much courage. And I just, it's devastating. And I too, every day with the news, I mean, it's too much. But that feeling of helplessness, of how did we let this go on for 4 years? That's why we should vote.
I know.
Well, yes, we've just said 2 main reasons why we need to go out and vote on November 3rd.
I just want to add to that, immigration has always been messed up in the world, not only in this country. But there were questions of policy that people agree or disagree with. I mean, Obama was the deporting chief. Like, I was not like thrilled about that aspect of Obama, but there was a logic behind the deportations. And what we're seeing right now, not only with immigration, but with women's rights, with racial inequality, with a whole bunch of other issues, is the politics of cruelty. There is no policy involved. There's no reasoning. There's no, you cannot have a conversation and exchange ideas. It's just cruelty, pure cruelty. It's like just fucking people over, no matter how you look at it, it's just pure cruelty. just want to, like, I came to this country when I was 18 and I'm not a citizen, so I can't vote. So you guys, please vote. But it was a pain in the ass. It was super difficult to get my green card. And I did it, and I did the right thing, whatever. And I can't imagine the people who didn't have the resources that I did, or the support that I did in order to go through that process. And most people don't. How they deal with it. I cannot, because of changes that Trump has made in immigration law, I actually cannot become a citizen. I cannot apply for citizenship. So, it's like, and before it was like, you could disagree with people, but it wasn't just cruelty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing,
Well, you could marry him. You could be like his seventh wife and he'd make sure the laws would work for
God,
you.
no.
Because, that's how she and her family got in, is he changed the laws right after he got his wife in and her family. And then all of a sudden, and so I just had to say that because nobody talks about these things.
I know.
and speaking of, oh, go ahead, ma'am.
What was that, Benja? I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, but speaking of her, and this would be just really quick, when she went to visit those children and had that saying on the back of her coat, that, what was it? We don't care, or I don't care. And the other thing was, when they brought those children to court and they were asking those children, I guess, whatever questions they were asking them, I don't know. And how would you expect an infant or a child or even a teen to answer responsibly about what the situation was going on with them being deported and being away from their parent? So I don't know what's going on with these Republicans. I don't know what's going on with this country, but it has to be fixed. And that's why we have to go to the polls in 2 days and not only vote this president out, but go down the line and vote these Republicans out, because they are not taking responsibility for any of this shit that they helped to cause.
As long as she was an immigrant, it was important. And now that she's an American citizen, I don't know if you guys heard the tape of her talking to her assistant and the BS that she said, and I mean, at one point, as a female, because I'm female first, so at one point I was like, well, maybe she just dumb and she just don't understand. But then I heard this conversation and she was like, fuck them, and why should I do this, and this is stupid and that's stupid. And I'm like, yeah, well, I guess that would be the best conversation coming from a prior hoe video queen, to not have the whole lack of empathy and compassion that not only that this president has, but her. And then the predominantly, I'm not going to say all, because all Republicans don't think that way. The ones that are, which is about, I don't know, from what we see in the public, at least 95% of them are, they have no compassion, because their truth is, I'm about party and not about people. And that's the problem. And so now that we're 2 days away and he's faltering, now they want to get away. So yeah, it's just ridiculous about, what we're doing. And I want to know, like, so someone in the chat room wants to know, how do we feel about her as a first lady representing our country?
Well, I mean, I too am female first, so I generally feel, I don't like to denigrate women even when they deserve it. Just because there are usually different rules, you know what I mean? But I think it's terrible. I mean, obviously, to me, nobody in this administration represents me or the country that I believe we have in us, and in those tapes that you were talking about the kids. I mean, the Christmas thing, the kids, all of it. It's no, she's gross, and she knows. It's the whole family. None of them seem to want to actually do the work.
Yeah.
And so, if we think about, and look, I think, and and I'm not sure, whatever. I think next to Trump, and it's a close call, Ronald Reagan is one of the worst modern presidents we've ever had. And I was no fan of Nancy, but I tell you, like, I mean, obviously Michele is kind of the gold star to there's a reason she's the most admired woman in the world. But you know, I just think she's terrible, and I think she has no, and she knows what she's doing. I agree. Like at first, because she's a woman, I too was like, well, she's, you know, she's obviously made her bed, she's there because of his money, and that, and you felt sorry for her. But the more that went on, she's a participant in it as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think she nor any Trump Republican represent the country or any of us. I don't think that I think the rules have changed with Trump Republicans. I think that they sold their soul to the devil.
To the devil.
And there is no way back. But she in particular, and I'm with Christina, I don't want to put any woman down, but this woman represents only herself. Just like Trump Republicans, they represent themselves. They represent their interests. They represent their predator look of the world. They represent the worst greed, the worst, like the worst of the worst of the worst of humanity is that family. And I, you know, as a woman, they're just like men. They're good women, bad women. She takes the cake. Like I don't care much about Christmas. I'm not a religious person. But imagine if Michelle Obama had been caught on tape saying "fuck Christmas," like it would have been like ridiculous and scandalous. And she says it, and nothing happens. And it should be really. I mean, if anybody can say "fuck Christmas," like who cares? It's your opinion. But the fact the double standards between Trump Republicans and what they can get away with and the rest of humanity is ridiculous.
I think she's an example of a failure of morality in the country right now. But this whole first family is very transactional. You can tell that she married him for power and money, and she, at first, when I saw her in the inauguration, he was treating her so badly and ignoring her that I felt empathy for her. But actually, there's a reason why they're married, and it's a marriage of convenience for both of them to represent something that they aren't. And it's very unfortunate that she is supposed to represent the United States and he's supposed to represent the United States. But it's also, to bring it back to voting, a reason why you go and vote, because you want to be heard, that you don't want to be represented by the lowest common denominator. You don't want to be represented by ignorance and hatred and dividing people and thinking that the only way that you can be respected is to cause other people to hate each other or to divide the country. And that's what they're the best at doing right now. And so that's one of the most powerful reasons to go out and vote.
And I just want to just say quickly, I will put another spin on it. I really, and I said this earlier, I really think that she is a Russian operative. I think that she, when she speaks German, she reports back to that factor. And, you know, I remember when she first came out, her thing was bullying. She did not want people to be bullied, but she married one of the biggest bullies that has ever sat in that presidency in modern times. And so, and I really don't think that she really cares about America or cares about anything that Americans are going through. So I just want to see that first family out, and I'll just say that.
The difference between Nancy and what is her name? Melania, because I'm just telling you, I'm serious. I was like, Ivanka, don't get mad, y'all. Because I don't care. I'm just done with you. So the difference between Melania and Nancy Reagan was that at least Nancy had compassion and she would check her husband every now and then where she could. Where this one, this, whatever he believes in is what she believes in. And so what we have in the White House right now are a bunch of criminals. So, I mean, we could talk about like all the stuff. And then as women, people want to say, oh, well, you guys are so emotional. You're women. We're not being emotional right now. We're being factual, and we're talking about facts. And we're not allowing our emotions of how we feel, because we could care less. If she did whatever she did and she did the right thing, we'd be like, yes, go girl. And I'm not trying to break her down either, but I'm trying to say that you do not represent us. You do not represent real women, because a real woman wouldn't let her trifling husband go out and not wear a mask during the COVID and come home in the bedroom where her son lives or where her child lives. So like, when you think about those kind of things, if they put themselves in jeopardy or their children in jeopardy, what do you think that they care about us and putting us in jeopardy? Because it's not making sense to me that people are still dying right before the election, and you're saying you wouldn't change anything differently that you did. You're still going out here holding these super spreaders, making people sick. You don't care. You don't care about us, so we don't care about you. And as Benja said, or as Martin Lawrence would say, get the stepping.
No, COVID just unveiled and made really obvious the incredible inequality in this country. I mean, we all knew that existed, but with COVID, it was just like so much in your face, in everybody's face.
And I mean, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which is important, is directly related to that, which is leadership. And I, you know, I worked in management, on the management side in theater for many years. And so I, you know, it's, and that's hard, but like, you know what good leadership is, you know, and in COVID, and I mean, I wish I could credit Donald Trump with either not caring and letting people die because it was intentional, or being, you know, an operative in some way. But I just think that and it's shocking to me that people, and that's what's so hard, right? Our perceived reality. Like, it's really hard for me to understand that somebody would allow, out of incompetence, this, you know, what's happened with COVID. I mean, like, there's so many things that, I mean, and if you look, I mean, we would sit here before COVID. I hated Andrew Cuomo. You know, it's like, I mean, I knew he was a good politician, but you know, he's a dick. But his leadership, whatever you think of him during, especially April in this state, was like, I mean, every day, right? Like every day we're like, what's going on? What's going on? And he did it right, you know, and leadership is hard, and you have to take responsibility. And I just don't think that he knew what to do. You know, I mean, I just don't think that he knew how to be effective. He hasn't been effective in 4 years. I mean, that's the real thing about leadership. Oh, I'm going to pull us out of this, the Paris Accord, but I'm not going to have an idea on how to deal with climate change, which is huge, you know, and all of these things that you would think ahead and you would think expansively. It just was like, nope, nope, nope. And if I go out and do rallies, that's all that I need. And so to me, the leadership question on how this country has been led over the last 4 years is really the thing for me that every day, you know, again, there's a lot of people, presidents that I have not liked, but they have not been this incompetent, and the people around them have not been this incompetent. And whether it's incompetence or whether it's pure evil, like with Stephen Miller and the immigration policies. And, you know, that to me, but I think Trump is completely incompetent. And that leadership question, and I think in COVID, he just thought, well, it'll go away or it won't matter. And if I gaslight, but now, you know, 2 days before the election, look at what's happening in the country. And how are we represented by this? And it's global. We can't do this, you know. And I get that people had a very, you know, that people felt that they hadn't been being heard in this country. And it's a very powerful thing for someone to say, it's not your fault, it's these people's fault.
I agree. I feel like what's lacking in him is that he has never had any platform except himself. And the only thing he's really consistently done is to roll back all of Obama's accomplishments. And that's what he thinks is his platform. Uh, and I would like to segue to the climate and the environmental policies that have just been rolling back clean air, clean water. Right now, New York City is considered a subtropical climate because of all the changes on the earth. We have more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more floods, more fires. And all of this is due to human behavior. And the earth has lost half its wildlife in the last 40 years, endangering our lives every day. And humanity has wiped out 60% of the wildlife since 1970. It's quite amazing to think that we can put on the back burner where we actually live in our homes because of all of this noise we're hearing from him. And he has no solutions for anything, because anything that doesn't make him look good makes him angry. So he puts everyone down. And that's his form of leadership, by trying to be as uncompassionate and as nasty as possible. I think he's only known how to be a bully all his life. And so whenever he gets put into a position where he realizes he's wrong, he really doesn't know what to do, and he just has to thrash out and accuse Dr. Fauci of being incapable, and instead of ever taking responsibility. And I think especially during a pandemic when we're at home, I agree with you, Christina, that Governor Cuomo really was amazing during the beginning of what was happening in New York City, because he would give us a plan of how to behave and how to work. And we needed that, because it's very frightening to know that something can kill you that you can't see and you don't know anything about it. And I think that to diminish the fact that there's something that's killing everyone all over the world is shocking to me. Especially, I felt like there was a lot of arrogance actually in the United States and in Europe, in thinking that it was not going to affect them because it was these third world countries in Asia and in Africa that were having all of the pandemic epidemics before, so it would never happen to them. And I think that's why we're in the situation we are now. I mean, I'm from a very obedient culture. They tell you to put on a mask, we do right away, and we won't ask about it. And that's a problem, but it probably saved a lot of lives because of that. And we could use a little bit more of that. We tend to, in this country also, there's this misunderstanding of what the word freedom means. Freedom does not mean that you can be more selfish because you want to be more independent to yourself. Freedom means being able to have the ability to see that you have to think about everyone else so that they have the ability to think the way they want. And as an immigrant kid who's traveled over the world, I can say that every time I've come back from a country that does not have the democracy that we do, you can feel it. I came back from China. I was so relieved to even get on the United Airlines plane in Shanghai. It felt more free than standing in Shanghai because of how they police your thoughts, they police your behavior. You come here and everyone's kind of doing their own thing. And it's really an amazing thing. And that's why we have to vote, to be able to retain that kind of level of being able to say and be how you want. My father had said, you have to vote because that's your only voice. And he died after 18 years of living in the United States, but he tried his best. His boss stole his ideas as an engineer, and he didn't say anything because he knew that he would be punished as a Chinese man. And my mom didn't want him to lose the job, but he still believed firmly in this country because he had another boss who wanted to meet all of us in the family and asked us what our dreams were to be in the future. So this country has so much potential to keep. And I think that's one of the most important reasons to vote.
Your voice is your vote, and your vote is your voice.
I don't understand the people who do not want to wear masks. I don't understand where that thought process is coming from. And maybe somebody can explain it to me. Annie, I think what you said is right, that we do have a lot of freedoms here, and people can pretty much believe what they want, but in terms of science, I don't understand why some people don't respect the scientists and look at what is happening. Even at these events, they see that people are getting sick and they still won't wear a mask. So I don't understand that.
But then that goes back to what Christina said, that goes back to leadership. So never in a time have we had a person in the White House who is supposed to be the leadership of the country be so defiant and so self-defecating in their own manner, in their own walk and talk. And so when you have someone like that, it's just like we're all have been. I think I'm pretty sure I know that most of us in this room have been teachers. It's hard to be a teacher to teach your kids right and wrong when they are seeing this in the White House and they say, "But Miss Michele, if so and so," and I'm like, "Listen, he's in there by default." And so the same way the country was built on lies, robbing, cheating, and stealing, which is a whole nother conversation. You know, our ancestors, some of us who've had ancestors that were here before their ancestors came here, they were robbed, beaten, stolen, and lied to. And so now we've got someone in the White House who wants to make America great again, when at a time when it was robbed, stolen, and raped in the whole nine. So we can talk about that on another time, but that's the truth of what it is. And at the end of the day, science is science, and we need to wear our masks so that we could, like, if just think about it, if everybody, like Annie said, we think of like, oh, I can do whatever I want to because blah 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 blah. But if you knew that for 3 months, if we all stayed home for 3 months and we all wore a mask and this disease died down to almost nothing, wouldn't you want to do that, as opposed to now it's 7 months and now we're like, oh my God, we got to go back to wearing a mask, and oh, we're not going to see theater and movie our liberties of just doing simple things are not, it's not about your freedom, it's about your health, it's about living and dying. And we're so busy trying to, we have a selfish president, we have a selfish person leading our country that says it's okay to be selfish and it's okay to do whatever you want to do because you have the right, to the point of, and we're going to get into this is going to segue into the next conversation, to the point of the worst terrorists in the world are homegrown here in the United States. They have started at the Ku Klux Klan. They moved up in the world as the Ku Klux Klan. Then they became the German Nazis. And now you have the good old boys and all these other things that are coming up, to the point that you would threaten a woman, a woman, because she's a leader who's doing right by her people. You would threaten to kidnap, kill, mangle, and do whatever you wanted to do with her, and he's okay with that. So this is what we're looking at as leadership. So when we talk about crime and violence, we always want to look at the urban community. Oh, we don't want our suburban community being infiltrated by those people. Well, guess what? Your people are the ones that you need to worry about. Those are the criminals that you need to worry about. So let's start talking about what real crime and social injustice is, and let's talk about what that looks like in this country, because we only want to focus on the people that look like us in this box as the criminals and not the other face of a criminal. So let's talk about that. So whoever wants to address that.
All right, well, I'll start. Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting because of all of the Proud Boys stuff and the threat against the governor. There's been a lot of talk about, I mean, and I always thought I was a little well versed on the militia, but that Timothy McVeigh this is the same militia that blew up the Oklahoma building in the early 90s. It's like, if it wasn't a white group of people, that would have been the main focus of the FBI for years. You know what I mean? And it's weird. I mean, we went to when you're in those places, obviously, but it's a huge problem, and it's going to get worse. I mean, this is the other thing when we talk about leadership, it's like, you might not say agree with one of the candidates, but he's not going to support white supremacy. You know what I mean? He's not going to give a pass. And it's not just a pass. Now other Republicans are, and that woman in, is it Delaware, the one who, or in Virginia, who's like totally racist QAnon woman who's going to get elected to Congress. And there's this, and as we all see, and I'm not telling anybody in this room anything they don't know, of course, but it's different. It used to be you weren't so proud about being racist, and now it's like, well, I can just be racist, and it's like, obviously it's horrifying. And that, again, you choose with your vote. Are you going to amplify the white militia that are the biggest terrorist threat to the country, or are you going to go with the person who's going to shut that down? And that's the choice that that we're talking about.
I think it also comes down to a misunderstood version, going back to a little bit to what Annie was saying about freedom. Like the people who are like, the right to bear arms, freedom of religion. It's become so twisted that it loses meaning. It's a really messed up, like clearly misunderstood concept of freedom. Your freedom to carry arms is like, no. Like, no, you cannot be carrying AK-47s and like shooting people. Like, no, that's not freedom. That's just stupidity and common sense.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll just add on really quick to that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize, but because
No.
we all work in, or have been a part of the theater, I mean, the reason is all stories, right? The reason that we think freedom comes without responsibility is either because of the movies we've watched or the way that politicians have twisted stories to for their own gain. So Fox News this is all propaganda too, and if you listen to that constantly, of course you're like, oh well, this is terrible, of course these people are terrible. And it's it's the stories that we tell from way back and the stories that we don't tell and that to me has become just so clear. And I was writing a play last year that really was all about that, like who can tell whose stories and what happens when you do that. And I have a piece coming up with Labyrinth, and part of it has about a story that the first time I went to the Bronx, I was terrified. I was just like, I was on East Fordham Road, and I totally went, oh my God. For the first time, I thought, whoa. I grew up in San Francisco in the 70s. I thought I was liberal. But the reason why is because of the stories that I'd heard, and like on the news, on all this. And I was like, well, this is messed up. Like the reality of a situation is not the situation. It's the stories that were told about it. So I think that's huge as well.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Christina, because I was thinking of how for a while it was very difficult for me to watch the news because I felt like every story seemed to be very inflated for whatever purpose it was to bring in ratings. And it made me have to, I prefer now to read the news so I can hear it in words according to how my voice would be, and to see if I can distill what it is that people are saying without hearing their voices. Not to mention that I find it almost impossible to listen to 45's voice. But one of the things I have been thinking about a lot from the Buddhist definition of freedom is that freedom is actually the ability to have a completely open mind, because now you have taken away all of your negative feelings, all of your extremely sharp emotional responses that drive your hatred and your anger and your jealousy and your envy to make you feel powerful, but they're all very temporary. And I think what we need now is to go back to finding that ability in ourselves to try to remain calm so we can be open and see what's going on. Because I actually really do feel that we have the power now to change things. And it's definitely through our ability to vote and our ability to protest and write letters that's going to move things along. We're not totally helpless. I think that's what the GOP wants us to think, so.
Leslie, if you have some commentary that you'd like to give, as well as T. Renee, about something that you feel as a concern.
One thing about if you're undecided on how to vote that I've been thinking about a lot, it's I'm actually always surprised when someone is undecided, but I think that if you're having problem deciding who to vote for, it might be useful to make a list of all the pros and cons and see which part weighs out heavier for you to help you decide in a sort of more of an objective way. And the other thing is voting for an elected office is not like going on a blind date. You don't have to look for your ideal person. You're looking for as much as you can that's going to benefit a lot of people and also make yourself proud that you went to vote.
Awesome. And I think that, it's sometimes, when you're talking about voting and it seems like I get it, like if you're not inspired, if whatever, it's all fucked up anyway, why not be selfish? Why or not, or why care at all? But there's so much. I mean, if you think about, education, we haven't talked about healthcare, we haven't talked about both. Healthcare a
So
little bit, but
speak to something, one of those that you want, that you feel
so
passionate about.
I would say education, just because we don't talk about that a lot in the middle of everything else that we have to do. It's, it makes a difference. I mean, imagine if we'd had a really good Secretary of Education who would have started planning in April how to open schools in September. Somebody who would fight for the rights of students, who, would try to, and I agree. I mean, Annie, I think you talked about this earlier. The lack of immigration being able to come in is hurting all of the industry that we have. And so, and people coming in to share, the whole thing was trying to stop students from coming in to, and the horrible immigration practices with that. And we're in a global society, there's no going back. And I know that it's hard sometimes for people to accept the future that's coming, but we can't act alone and we have to be interconnected. And imagine if we were in good standing with our allies and we were all working on a vaccine together, if we were all working on how to get everything under control and support each other together. So education is so important. And that doesn't mean fancy, highfalutin, elitist education. That just means people who are able, when I finally realized what math was about when I was in college, it's not about equations, it's about learning how to think. It's about learning how to solve a problem. And if somebody had told me that in high school, I would have been like, oh my God, I get that now. And in fact, I said that to a friend of mine who was getting her teaching degree, and that's what she used to like get hired places, was that. So that's a huge thing. I mean, just think about with COVID and the kids. Education is important. And there's a big difference between the candidates on that.
I agree with what Christina said, that education is important. Education and the arts are important. The things that we're in, there's no science, there's no super scientists who hadn't taken a great art class. Art and science, they all go together. Education, our children need to be educated. If we look into the future of the world, we need to educate our children. But at the same time, like you said, Christina, where's the plan? But when you put all your old, and I hate to say, because I'm not I live in a world of like, I try to be like we're all us, like US, right? But you put a bunch of old white men in the White House who have no concern about arts, education, housing, and anything else for that matter. Everybody's in there to get their piece of pie from our pots, from the pots that keep us thriving at the bottom. So yes, education and having education, someone in charge of education in the White House, like a Secretary of Education that actually studied and that actually knows what to do, would have made the world of difference. But here we are, and I'm sure you guys are facing the same thing. It is November 1st, and our children are still at home trying to manage a box And if they have no money, there is no Wi-Fi. I don't know how many of you have taught over the summer. I had to teach to children whose parents were on a little phone, and I didn't see the babies. So where's the connection? I couldn't connect to them because their mama had all she had was a phone, and the Wi-Fi was going in and out. So how are we teaching? And the school systems didn't even have a plan, because there wasn't a plan up top, so there wasn't a plan at the bottom of how our kids are going to continue to learn, and how are they going to continue to learn now until, and other than going to school and being put in jeopardy and being scared and threatened.
I can tell you that I am working in the school system. There is not a lot of live teaching because there's just not a lot of teachers. That was the question that was asked by somebody, and you guys can chime in. But I can tell you that I'm teaching every day, and I was teaching yesterday. A lot of households just don't have connection right now. The students are not, at least in District 75, are not coming in right now for whatever reason. Could be a lot of confusion. So the question is, should we go full remote? Should they go back to school? And if they do go full, if everybody goes remote, should the DOE or the mayor?
I'm like, oh, let me speak to that, right? I want to frame it in, while you were all speaking, the thing that came to my mind was, I've been thinking about a lot, and we attribute it to Mother Maya. But most of us learned this from our mothers and our aunties, and that is, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And it holds true for this country as well. When America shows you what it is, believe it. And why I've been like tied in knots recently, meaning anger, so angry I can barely speak, is because we have seen for a lifetime what this country is. I have seen for a lifetime what this country is. And so my anger right now is these fools in Washington and beyond. They've been there. They've always been there. We've always seen them. And someone said earlier, they just didn't speak up before. They weren't empowered to speak up before. Now, what's happening in the White House has allowed them to speak up. But when we have gone into our workplace, some of us, we've seen it. We've been told, we can go back to the whole argument about, as an example, how to wear your hair. You have to be this kind of way. Or when our children go to schools, there's an assumption that they have Wi-Fi and they have laptops or whatever to do the work. There's this assumption about a huge segment of America's population. And I'm going to speak from what I know as a Black person. I'm talking about Black people. So I guess I'm asking a question, and I'm going to speak to what Renee said about opening up our schools. Like Betsy DeVos, it was just like somebody said either yesterday, today I heard it, how, she started a super PAC. Like, this person who is identified to be head of education in this country is doing everything she can to keep 45 in office. This is who America is. This is who America has always been. And I am frustrated and I am angry because we keep seeing it over and over and over again. Can the kids go back to school? How can they go back into the classroom when we don't have a national plan on how to keep the children safe, how to keep the teachers and the maintenance and the cafeteria workers safe, who will then potentially bring something to their home, which, how do we keep our families safe? We don't have a national plan. And for students to be in school, there's still, like, parents have a choice. I need to have my child taught remotely. So who is going to supply them with the internet or the tablets it's crazy. So I'm going to leave that there. And then I'm going to the question that was burning in my head about when people show you who they are, when America shows you who they are, believe them, is we are an apathetic country. We knew who 45 was, those of us who were born and raised in New York, that we knew who, And by raised in New York, I mean, you started living here 20 years ago and you were raised up from then, whenever. You know, we knew who he was. He wasn't going to change. One more thing, because I don't want to take up your time. Same thing about the woman he married. Feel no pity for her. She is who she is. She was always who she was. They are great at showing people, you know, we have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of money. This is who they are. But we as voters, we as community members, you know, if somebody can speak to, like, what are your thoughts on how do we have these conversations? I've heard so many people say, I'm not going to speak with a 45 supporter because I don't want to argue with them. And I said this to someone else, every discussion is not an argument. But why not have a conversation about a baby ripped from their mother? Why not have a conversation about children who are not being educated? I'm a person of a certain age. Why not speak about the fact that my Social Security may not be there when I need it in the very near future? So it is us that I am having a huge problem with.
Yeah, no, I just want to add, because I didn't grow up in this country, and I think that gives me like the advantage of looking from the outside. But I grew up with movies, so I knew, like I knew New York for movies, um, and then moving here, it's been so bizarre just to learn the real New York or the real United States, in and it keeps changing. Like, I don't think I know the real anything. Um, I don't think I know anything, but but to see, I mean, speaking of, like, education, the assumption, like you said, that people will have technology, that will have computers. There's so many misconceptions from the administration. Like, even at Purchase College, that whole discussion was, going remote, going half and half, who can teach, who can. And the assumption was like everybody has a computer and a place to work, like a desk with a computer with a good internet. And you have no idea how many kids I have who are like taking class from their bunker beds with like little kids running around, and who's
Mhm.
like, and they're rural students. The administration at Purchase was like, oh yeah, we have very disadvantaged students from the Bronx. And I'm like, I'm in the Bronx. And really, the disadvantaged ones are not the Bronx or urban areas. They're the rural students who don't have an internet connection, who don't have a way to like live, who are living in totally dysfunctional families, and who are stuck at home now with nowhere to go. And it's super hard to educate kids that way. Now, I know elementary school and little kids is a whole other ball game. If it were up to me, I would have canceled the academic year for college, high school and college. Like, go volunteer, or go, go do something with your life. And nobody's gonna die if you miss 1 year of school at that age. I mean, kids is a whole other. I don't know anything about kids, but I think that high school and college would have benefit to just take a year off and work on something important, like volunteer, work as a poll worker, like do something that is worth it. Because I don't think they're getting much, to be honest, uh, with the system that we have right now.
Yeah.
And the administration doesn't care. Like everybody in this administration, the people in charge don't believe in the things that are in charge of. So Betsy DeWitt doesn't believe in public schools. Like energy doesn't, like EPA doesn't believe in climate change. Like all these things is like living in it's Alice in Wonderland. It's living upside down.
Because there are people in place that don't honor or hone that knowledge of this, of what they're taxed to be over. What's supposed to make any country great would be empowering people with knowledge, empowering people with healthcare, empowering people with opportunities to be successful. And everything that you do is like, well, the haves and the has nots. And if you don't have it, oh, well, so who cares? And why should we do for you? And why should we give for you? It just mind boggling to me that the things that are the most important to us as a whole, as a country, education. Every child that lives in the United States should have a hot meal, should have the same education. If you want to be a great country, you educate the people that live here so that we can breed scientists, mathematicians, and artists, and people that keep the world thriving and making it better. But no, it's so nice to say, oh, look what I've got all this money. And speaking of money, this person doesn't have any money. But anyway, the point is that when you go out and vote, when you go out to vote, you have to think about these things and these people. And you have to ask yourself, is this person or this party giving me what I need? If you can align the pros of the party that aligns best to you, sadly, go vote there. I mean, I wish we didn't have a Republican or Democratic party that we had to make a decision. I want to vote for people that are for us. I don't care what side of the lane you roll on. If you are for the United States and the people in the box and the people in the world as an entirety, then that's the person that I want to vote for. But it's up to us. And if you've already voted, go help somebody else vote, because it's not too late.
We have to hold our local officials accountable. It's not just who 45 is. We have to hold our assemblymen. We have to hold, all of the local people who we can walk into their office and say, listen, what are you doing? What are you doing that my cable is so high that I can't, that I may not be able to afford to have cable? What are you doing about this? We have to vote on the local level for the people who represent us so that they can talk to the people who we can't get to, like the next president. We can't have a dialogue with them, but we could definitely have a dialogue with our local officials. The last thing I would just say before we wrap up is one of the issues that I don't see any candidate talking about, and this has always been a thorn in my side, is GMO. I don't hear any candidate talking about GMO. And I'll just leave it at that.
And that falls under climate control and the sustainability of the planet. So yeah, you can talk about that. That is something that, if anybody wants to speak to it, I mean, that is something that should be spoken about, because that's not being talked about.
I agree with that, but I also think that it's tied to education, because if you don't educate people to believe in science, if you don't educate people to be open-minded, if you don't educate people about like civics, like living within society, then we're not going to change anything, and we're going to burn the world to death. But I also think that this, like, people vote against their interest, and people vote with a lot of ignorance. But also the system is skewed, and the electoral college, if anybody wants to talk about that, it's screwing us all up.
I just wanted to talk a minute to what Leslie was asking or talking about a little bit. Again, liberal white girl from San Francisco thought she understood things, and I think it was a real shock to people, obviously all of us, when Trump won. And then there was it Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle were on Saturday Night Live soon after, and they did a whole skit laughing at white people, going, "This is anything new." And I am an eternal optimist. I always say I'm a realistic optimist, but I look for whatever that is spiritually, the connection. And for 4 years, what I've thought is we have the most opportunity to change for the better than we've ever had, just because I think of it as the rocks keep getting turned over, and it's like the maggots, I mean actual, like when you turn over a rock, maggots. I'm not making any commentary on anybody's supporters. But that you can't help but see the truth. And we are a country, again, of stories that we believe in. We've saved the world twice. We overcame the British. We, had a civil war, and we did the right thing, and then I thought about it in regards to getting Obama elected the first time. we were living in Harlem, actually, on 135th Street, and Scout, my daughter and I would go over to the office like across the street and do all this work. And my husband went to Pennsylvania for a week and slept on somebody's couch. And everybody like really came out to get somebody elected. And he got elected and we all went, oh, that's great. Now we're just going to turn away and do with our own lives, you know, and that the sustain, you have to sustain that participation.
Yeah.
And I mean, the great thing that the Republicans and Karl Rove did, and I hate them all, Karl Rove Republicans, was the local officials. Benja, you're right. I mean, they understood that they could change the maps of you know, the districts. They understood right now. The thing is that if they have to certify the election, right? That's what happens. We have an election and then the state has to certify it. Well, he has people in places like in Wisconsin. So if it, you know, that they're talking about not certifying it if they don't want to. And this is like, you know, you either play by the rules or you don't. So Leslie, what I'm saying is, I think it's been a big wake up call for a lot of white people who consider themselves liberals and who knew things. At least I hope so.
I wanted to add to Christina and Leslie, I don't have an answer about what to do about schools, and whether to open them or working remotely, but I feel like education is so important. It was mainly what my father said, that was why we're coming to the United States, so we would learn how to think and use our minds. And I feel that that's one of the gifts that this country has, if it would use it. And if we use it and we actually do the homework to go and vote, we can analyze for ourselves what is useful and not. And I had a liberal education at UC Berkeley. And I have to say, in many ways, it was a disservice to me because I felt like I was so smart that I didn't want to vote for the establishment. And that was the whole point, was to be able to vote. It was not about thinking I was a smart aleck and I was above that, because I wouldn't get any of my rights if I wasn't heard. And it took me remembering what my father said, that because you must vote because you have a voice, to bring me back to thinking this is actually the only time in my life, besides when you go for jury duty, where you actually have a responsibility to others. And that's why it's really critical not to give that opportunity up to vote and say that, oh, I'm tired, I'm working too much, or I can't decide, so I'll let someone else decide, because that's how we also got 45. The number of people who voted was so low. So that's why we must vote.
It only takes one vote. In all fairness, anyone who's elected to the presidency has many issues, and they cannot tackle them all. And so, I think when you're voting, you have to realize that you're voting to make a change, right? So we have to stop looking for a politician to be a savior, to be this person that's gonna, like, I don't think Joe Biden and Kamala are gonna jump in and save the day. I know they're gonna try to save the day. I know that they're gonna listen to us and hear and try, but we have to remember, everything that we want done is just not gonna happen. And it's not going to happen because that one person doesn't make those decisions. So like Ben just said, you have to go at the bottom, at your board of education, your board of freeholders, your councilman. You have to get involved. So I charge people to not only go out and make a vote on November 3rd or during the other elections throughout the year, the secondary, the Senate runs every 2 years, go out and vote. But as Ben just said, to get involved, like, we have to start doing an action and stop talking about it. Stop. That's all we do, because that's all they're doing. So I'm charging you ladies here. I would love to start a think tank conversation of people that a civil think tank, where we can start looking at things that we can make a difference, whether it's in your city or my city or wherever, or your state or whatever level, just to have these conversations, to talk to Republicans, to talk to independents, to find out what they're thinking. Why do they think differently than you? What is the common ground? What are the things that are important to us as a whole, as a society? And yeah, we do have a person in the White House right now who has given a license to say, yes, I'm racist and proud of it, damn it. That's the problem. That's another. So these things, we know they exist, but go out and vote and research and just go damn vote.